Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, young men and young women. My name's Jesse Romero, and it's funny, I get invited to do a lot of public speaking for the Catholic Church. That's what I do for a living. In former times, I was a deputy sheriff for 15 years. I know all these guys right here. I worked with them. Before that, I used to run a karate studio back in the early 80s, late 70s for Chuck Norris in Northridge. And for the Sheriff's Department, I ran this boxing gym for about 4 years before I left the department. Now I do a lot of public speaking for a lot of groups. And it's funny because usually where I go and talk, I have an audience that wants to be there. You probably don't want to be here, but that's okay. I've got a captive audience anyhow because you're part of this Vida program. But what I want to talk to you for the next couple of minutes is something that's, to me, is very important. And this is something that I hope that I can just convey it to all of you. Last night when I was at home and Deputy Romero and Deputy Burtness had asked me to come and speak with you, it's not very difficult to speak to large crowds of adults because they want to be there and they basically want to hear what I've got to say. They want to hear the message of the gospel. But I was thinking last night, what do I talk to these kids about? And I was asking my wife, honey, what can I tell them? And I was going through a lot of notes in my files. I was going through notes on self-esteem and motivational talks. And I said, you know what? That's not what I really want to tell you guys. I want to speak to you guys from the heart. Just from my heart to your heart. And hopefully when we're done here this afternoon, you can draw something from what I've said and you can use it to make yourself a better person. I actually canceled an engagement today to come and speak with you. And I consider this my privilege to talk to all of you. As I said, my name's Jesse Romero, and I was born and raised in San Fernando. Now, I have something that really troubles me, and I want to share it with you. When I was a deputy sheriff for 16 years, I'm going to tell you something that really caused a lot of grief, a lot of pain for me. And that's this, is that there's so many Latinos that are in jail. So many of our people that are busted. So many of our people that are using drugs. So many of our people that are alcoholics. So many of our people that don't have any direction. So many of our people that don't have any purpose. And I want to apologize to you as an older Latino, because a lot of us has really given you a lot of poor example. I mean, we could just not look too far from here and look at some people in the city council who are using narcotics. And here we want to tell you kids to stay off of drugs, and we have people in these high places that are not giving exactly a good example to all of us. And we also know the other scandals that are occurring elsewhere. What we need to be as a people, we need to be consistent in what we say and in what we do. See, every single one of us, this is something revolutionary that a lot of people don't understand. All of us here are one big family. Your name may be Tovar, your name may be Aguirre, your name may be Chacon, my name's Romero, your name may be Barrios, but we're one big family. See, and that took me a long time to comprehend that. Years and years. As a young kid, I went to Catholic school. I was trained by the Franciscan nuns. And these were things that they used to tell me, but as a kid, I just didn't process it. In my mid-20s, I came to understand. I came to see the big picture. And that's what I want you to see, that all of us are a family. This thing called life, it's pretty difficult. And we should encourage ourselves instead of trying to step all over one another. This thing called life is like boot camp. And the goal in this life is to be the best person that we can possibly be, and then to spend all eternity in the next. See, every one of you right here, you may not know it, but you're going to see it in the future. Every one of you is family to me. There's not that much that separates us. The experts say that every one of us, what makes us characteristically different is DNA. And our DNA is different from each and every one of us, 0.00053%. Very little separates us. Every one of us is a family. The problem with society here and now is that we have let go of God. If you throw God out of the picture, then we have chaos. And that's what we have right now. And even though it's very unpopular to say that we've let go of God, I know it's unpopular to say that in public schools, but you know something? That's a lot of hypocrisy. Because this country, America, was founded on principles, on Christian principles. Have you ever looked at your money? What does your money say? Does it say, in atheism we trust? No. What does it say in your currency? In who we trust? Yes. And you know something? America's forgotten where we started from. Do you know that the founding fathers, when they wrote our Constitution, which, by the way, you know what law enforcement does? They enforce constitutional law. That's why you have cops in the street. They're enforcing constitutional law. Where does law come from? If you go back to the founding fathers and you read that history, you know where it comes from? Where they gathered constitutional law from? The Ten Commandments. See, that's our problem in society. As Americans, as Latinos, whatever you want to call yourselves, we've got to anchor ourselves. We've got to go back to basics. I remember when I started taking karate back in 1978 from Chuck Norris, when he was a nobody back then. And he used to tell us, if you want to be good in martial arts, you've got to go back to basics. Learn the basics well and you're going to be effective. And I was pretty effective in martial arts. I got my black belt at 18 from Chuck Norris. I'm a second generation Chuck Norris black belt. I went on to do kickboxing at the age of 21 and I competed till about 30. And I won the U.S. Amateur National title on 2 occasions on ESPN. Why? I stuck to basics. And that's what we have to do. We have to go back to basics. I don't know if you remember, who saw that movie years ago called I Am Third? Raise your hand if you saw that movie. It's a good movie. It comes out periodically, comes out like every 2 years. It's with Brian Piccolo and Gale Sayers. Brian Piccolo and Gale Sayers were football players for the Chicago Bears years ago. A white guy and a black guy, best friends, which is kind of, it's politically incorrect these days to be like best friends with somebody outside of your culture, which is hogwash. Okay? They were best friends, and Brian Piccolo, he was dying of cancer. And Gale Sayers, he spent a lot of time with Brian Piccolo through the grieving process, through the dying process. And Brian Piccolo asked Gale Sayers one day, by the way, Gale Sayers is probably one of the best running backs in the NFL. Brian Piccolo told Gale Sayers, what is it that you got around your neck? What's that medal you're wearing? Gale Sayers says, I am third. Brian Piccolo says, what does that mean? Gale Sayers, one of the greatest running backs in the NFL, he said, the Lord is first, my friends are second, and I am third. And if you don't have it in that order, you're all confused. You're going to blow it big time. See, every one of us here, we're 3-dimensional people. Every one of us. As I stand, I'm a 3-dimensional person. I'm made of a mind. I can think. I can will. I'm made of a body. And I'm made of a spirit. We're 3-dimensional people, every one of you. 3-dimensional. Mind, body, and spirit. What do you do to feed your mind? You go to school. You read good books. You're constantly trying to feed your mind. You're trying to expand your knowledge. That's good. That's a good thing. What do you do for your body? A whole lot of things. You probably exercise this morning. You're probably in some sort of PE class by the looks of it. So we do a lot of things to feed our body. You eat good food. I know a lot of you don't, I'm sure a lot of you aren't starving. A lot of you look pretty healthy. So you do a lot to feed your body. Third aspect, what do you do to feed your spirit? That's the question. See, I'll tell you the problem that I saw when I was a deputy sheriff for 16 years. People out there, oh yeah, they're feeding their body, which is good. They're feeding their mind, which is good. But their spirit is dead. It's like if you've got a tricycle and one of the wheels is flat. The only way that you can feed your spirit is you got to go back to basics. I don't care what church you come from. I'm telling you to go back to that church. Okay? I'm not here to push any religion on you. I'm just here to tell you to go back to basics. Go back to the church that gives you your morality. I'm a Catholic, so obviously I draw my spiritual strength from the Catholic Church. You've got to go back to basics. Because if you think you're going to get your morality, if you think you're going to get your value system from talk radio or from talk TV programs, you're sadly mistaken. Let me tell you a big joke that occurred probably about 2 years ago, and most of the people in my generation, they just felt hook, line, and sinker. There's a book that came out about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago maybe. It's called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Who's heard of that book? Okay. Everybody was all excited about that book. They're running around, they're saying, wow, what a great book, man. You've got to read it, man. Hey, man, this guy's really got the principles of how to stay married. And it's funny, even guys at work were passing around that book, and they were telling me, Jess, you've got to read this. I know you're into family and stuff, Jess. You've got to read that book. Well, the author of that book has been divorced 4 times. Nobody knows that, okay? See, I did a little bit of research into this. And he was married to another person who's got a program on how to stay in love on cable TV, and she's been divorced twice. See, here's the problem. We're trying to learn what's right and wrong from the wrong people. I'm going to tell you something. I'll tell you where I get my morality from. It's real simple. And where I give it to my kids from, I've got 3 kids. And I'm called to be, the spiritual leader of my household. Not only the provider, the supporter, but I'm supposed to give my kids morality. I can't expect them to get that from school. Because, see, in school, pray is a 4-letter word. If you pray in school, that's like a bad word. I get my morality from the person who put families together. See, I'm like on a crusade to try to save families. That's all I do 5 days a week. I go all over the United States, and I tell people to stay married. And I tell people to raise godly children. And I tell people to go back to basics. That's what I do. I get my morality from the Bible. Do you guys know that the Bible is consistently the best-selling book every year? B. Dalton and Walton, Crown Books. Every single year, the bestseller is the Bible. And God is the one that started marriage and family. So I don't think you have to call up KFI or any TV talk show, Dr. So-and-so, and ask them about marriage and family. You should probably go right to that book and see what God has to say. Go back to basics. See, I'm a very simple person. And everything I do, I try to be good at the basics. You've got to go back to basics. You've got to exercise your body, your mind, and your spirit. And if you don't, there's a saying that King Solomon, who's the wisest king of Israel, he said this. King Solomon says, people without vision perish. You die. Do you got vision? Do you know what you want to do? You need to have a game plan. Because you know something? You're going to be 18, 19, 20, 25, 30, and you're going to be a wandering generality. I know people, I went to my 10-year reunion several years ago. A lot of guys that I graduated from high school with weren't there. Why? They didn't have a goal. They had no purpose. And I was calling them up and I was saying, hey, Eddie, Frank, are you going to go to our 10-year reunion? Well, they're in and out of drug rehabs. They're in and out of relationships. They're in and out of jail. There's nothing that they want to go and talk about after 10 years. They didn't have purpose. They didn't have direction. You need to start thinking about what you want to do right now. And you know what you need to do? Every morning when you wake up, when you hit your knees, you have to ask God. You have to ask the big guy for direction. Ask him. He wants to help you. Let me tell you, every single one of you was made unique. There is not one person in the world that has your characteristics, your personality, your soul. In all of the universe, you are unique. There is nobody else who was made just like you. You were made for a purpose. You were made to do something with your life. You know, when I was a kid, what the Franciscan sisters taught me, which is so right on the money, I recall 4th grader, Baltimore Catechism, question 6. What is the purpose of life? It still applies at 38. What is the purpose of life? I learned this in the 3rd and 4th grade. What is it? To know, to love, and to serve God in this lifetime, and then to spend all eternity with Him in the next. Bam. That's simple. Every one of us, we belong to Him. We're going to go back to Him. If you're not helping people, you're not living. If you're not doing something for somebody else, you're not living. Let me share a story with you that happened back in 1989 over, I think it was in Argentina. True story. Argentina got hit with a very potent earthquake. I forget, it was like 6.8. It was a humongous earthquake in Argentina. There was a father who was very close to his son named Armand. He dropped his son off, Armand, in school in the morning, and in the evening, when he was at work, the earthquake hit. The first thing Dad thought about was, my son Armand, where's he at? I've got to go to school. There's destruction all over Argentina. The records tell us that about 30,000 people got wiped out in that earthquake. This father, he drives over to his son's school, and it was completely demolished. Everything was toppled on top of the kids. There was silence. People are there, and they're weeping because they know that their sons are dead under all the rubble. Armand Sr., the father, he says, we've got to get our children. We've got to find our children. And all the parents and teachers were saying, they're dead. Can't you see what happened? Look at this rubble. Armand Sr., because of the love that he had for his son, he says, help me take off these rocks. Help me take off the rubble. Let's find our children. And the parent says, it's over, they're dead. Let's go. Armand Sr. stood there grabbing boulders and moving them out, one after another. 1 hour passes. He's by himself. He's moving one boulder at a time. The paramedics are there, the firemen are there. They're saying, let's go. Let's go. The children are dead. Armand Sr.'s there, he's there 2 hours. 3 hours by himself. He's moving the rocks. He's moving the rubble. 4 hours. 5 hours. After 8 hours by himself, Armand Sr., he hears a voice as he's moving. This is about the 5,000 piece of rubble that he's moved. And he hears a voice that says, Dad. And he looks down in this hole, and 40 feet under, he can see his son. And his son, Armand Jr., starts telling the kids, it's my dad, it's my dad. I knew my dad would never leave me. I knew my dad would never leave me. All the other parents walked out. They had no guts. And they left their kids there in a grave. But this man, because he was driven by love for his family and for his son, he dared to be different, and he stood there and he moved the stones one at a time. And after 8 hours, He found his son Armand Jr. and 40 other kids who were pinned under the rubble. That's the type of love that God has for every one of you. You know, when people stab you in the back, which is going to happen, by the way, if it hasn't already, if you're involved in a friendship or in a relationship, get prepared to be offended, because we're very imperfect people. Your family will let you down. Even sometimes your parents and teachers will let you down. But God will always be there for you. See, I believe that in the bottom of my heart. That's what gives me purpose in life. That's why I can forgive people, because I know that God has forgiven me. That's why I can love people, because I know that God loves me. You know how you get self-esteem? You don't go and buy these self-help books. If you realize that you're special, that you're unique, that you're a child of God, that's God esteem. That's all the esteem you need, because you're going to know that you have a purpose in life. You've got to find your talent. You've got to take time to find your talents. If you're into art, cultivate that talent. God would help you. You've heard of that saying. I think it was said by Benjamin Franklin. It's not scripture. God helps those who help themselves. That's true. Find your talent and go with it. I met this young man about 5 years ago when I was working for the sheriff's department, named Sal. He's over here. He was a young, skinny kid from around the neighborhood, but he told me that he wanted to box. So